Hi, I'm Nini, and welcome to Creative Angles, the podcast for creatives by creatives. Join us as we talk to people active in the ever-expanding world of the arts in an effort to both inform and inspire. And we're rolling! Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of Creative Angles. I'm your host, Nini, and today I'm here with someone who goes by many names, but today I'll call them Vylet. Vylet, welcome to the podcast.
What's good? The Huntress watches rare.
How are you?
I'm good. I'm sleepy. I have a nice drink, and I'm just chilling here.
Hell yeah. So what kind of title do you like to use for yourself for like all your creative endeavors right now?
Artist.
Just artist. Okay.
I started to just do whatever. So like obviously music is my primary thing, but I started like I'm doing a comic. I'm just like drawing shit. Sometimes I'm like making like performance art shit. Like I made my Bakugan video, which I'm super proud of. So like it's I just do art, whatever it is.
Hell yeah, whatever you feel like, essentially. How long have you been doing like art for as a whole?
I mean, I've been drawing since I was like conscious. But if we're talking like music specifically, that is a difficult thing to answer too. But best way I can say is that I started messing around with writing music first time when I was about 7 years old.
Oh, 7. Oh my goodness.
My parents had this like music set up in the living room.
Wow.
M1 Korg M1 keyboard and some like shitty G4 Macintosh Cube computer thing, and set up with GarageBand. I used to fuck around with it quite a bit. I can swear, right?
Yeah, you can. Yeah, no worries.
Okay, nice. And I made like weird beats and stuff for a while. So that was like starting when I was like 6 or 7.
Dang, that's so early.
I sort of did that on and off for a few years, and I like started to learn things like how to use like a DAW, how to like play piano enough to like write something. And then I started to like really ramp up this like idea of like doing music when I was maybe 11 years old in 2010. I started listening to a lot of like different music because my parents were starting to like oh, you can take this CD, put in the CD player, like you can have a CD player now and shit. And like first thing they put me on was like Bruce Springsteen, which was very formative. And then I kind of pivoted over to getting very interested in like art rock, alternative rock stuff, and that sort of started with like Muse and Radiohead, which I've fallen out of favor with Muse quite heavily, but they are part of my start.
Right.
And then listening to Muse, I got interested in Queen, and more than the average person, I think. Like it was a major hyperfixation for a long time. And then the canon event was getting into the band like Genesis. That was the big one for me. And I just put out the record Monarch of Monsters, which is like, I call it my Genesis worship album because like it references a lot of their music. It interpolates a lot of their music. Like 5 or 6 of the songs are just like worship to Genesis.
That's the band with Phil Collins, right? Or am I misremembering?
Yeah, that is the band with Phil Collins.
Right.
Very specifically thinking about like 1971 through 1977, and only a few of those years were Phil Collins involved.
Oh my God.
Phil Collins is the lead. No. I mean, he was in the band, but he didn't. When Peter Gabriel left in I think 1974, he took over as the lead, and then like they had the whole thing. Yeah.
Was this all physical media, by the way?
Physical media,
like CDs and stuff.
Oh, at first I was just borrowing shit from my dad.
Right.
Like, and I didn't own anything. It took me a while to actually start building a collection, like way later after all of this stuff happening right now. But, so it's just borrowing shit from my dad, like, using my iTunes on my fucking weird, like, personal computer in my room. And I was listening to Genesis. I was like, oh, I want to make this. And like, so I was dabbling with music a bit, and I was like, I'm gonna make this. And as it turns out, making music is hard. And like I was like 11 years old trying to like I'm gonna make a Genesis song with fucking GarageBand and like a shitty hand-me-down keyboard from like the vintage shop or whatever, and I could not do it. but I kept trying. My original alias was called Dark Phoenix, and Phoenix was spelled incorrectly, not by choice, but just because I did not know how to spell the words. Like the E and the O were switched. But you move on to late 2011, early 2012, and then there's the second canon event after Genesis, and that was Skrillex. And I was very closed off to music very intensely. My parents chose very specifically what kind of music I can listen to.
Right.
Very like kind of uptight Christian family shit.
Yeah.
And listening to Skrillex was like, it opened up my world to a million things. Because I didn't know music could sound like that. Right. I didn't know like a lot of music, and that was like one of the first things I like pirated was Scary Monsters and Nice Sprites. And like that was a need. That was an absolute need, and it changed my whole life. And that's when I started writing the kind of music that people would at least hear from me when I started the Vylet Pony project. So, long-winded way of saying, I technically started making music in like 2006, 2007, but I didn't like lock in till like 2010, and I didn't really start locking in until 2012.
When did the whole like pony thing get like mixed in?
I've told this story a million times, but getting into My Little Pony was interesting because my parents controlled a lot of like the media I was allowed to watch and stuff. But as I got a little bit older, they had a much harder time controlling that. And we went on a trip to Disneyland in the summer of 2012. Ooh. It was June, I believe it was June 19th, June 18th. Like down to the date, I remember this, I think. And I was super into stuff like Annoying Orange and like Nyan Cat and like all this like twee internet shit, and like that was my shit, and it always has been my shit. Obviously the story's not so different at this time either, because I feel like I'm very leaning into that quite a bit. But that was like stuff like that opened me up to being able to then internalize that when we went to Disneyland, I saw this guy wearing a Rainbow Dash t-shirt. And I was like, huh, that's so interesting. That's a Rainbow Dash t-shirt. And I thought to myself, why the fuck do I know that's Rainbow Dash? Why do I know that's Rainbow Dash? Like, it occurred in my head, like, that's weird. I don't watch that show. Why do I know? And on the train ride back, because we took the train to Disneyland that year, on the train ride back, I was like really, really fixated on that imagery. And it started off with, I went on my phone and using my like shitty, like, what the fuck is it called? Like, Go phone where you pay for like minutes with a card and shit. Oh my goodness. I had to use like bullshit, like Go phone data. I've got like maybe 50 megabytes a month or something. Yeah. And I used that only data I had for the entire month to go on Google and find a Rainbow Dash picture and make it my wallpaper. And funny enough, I still have that phone, and the wallpaper is still there.
Oh my god! Was it one of those like edits?
No, it was like an actual. I think it was like the Rainbow Dash intro, like screen cap from one of the first episodes, where she like comes in and she's like all confident. She got like a rainbow like in behind her.
Yeah.
And she's like looking super awesome into the distance. But I still have that phone. The wallpaper's still there, and last year I actually bought a new battery to like just look inside of it. Oh my god! And I could still use it. It's kind of crazy. But I remember at that time, my then girlfriend, who is like some person I met at like a school dance, I was like telling her that, oh my god, look at this awesome wallpaper I have. And she's like, what's going on? And she was like super chill about it, but like I could tell she was like, what is this? What's happening? And I remember she said, you're not gonna watch the show though, right? And funny enough is she had a friend, and that friend was really into My Little Pony as well. And that person was really tall, I remember. And we had a slow dance at another school dance later. And by that time I was into My Little Pony. I remember looking up at them and being like, you are Princess Celestia. Like, this person I'm dancing with right now is Princess Celestia. And coolest person in the universe. I don't know how this turn of events happened. We haven't spoken in 13 years, but I remember they were so kind. After that dance, they texted me like a trace they did of like a Rainbow Dash stock photo, and I like printed it out, and it was pasted to my work desk from 2012 to 2019.
Oh my gosh.
It's like I am so nostalgic like that. I'll keep that shit.
Pony Riz.
Pony Riz. It is literally the pony. Like they tried to pony Riz me up, Princess Celestia herself. But again, long-winded way of saying, when I really like officially got into My Little Pony, it was like very like a formal decision because at that time my friend Silver, or you can call them Izzy, either way. Silver Stripe has done a lot of stuff on my projects and stuff. You'll see their names there. You'll see their name everywhere. But at that time, a lot of times, every time I made like a major decision, I would just run it by them. Like we would always have these like deep conversations about this shit. And I remember, and this is in the lyrics to C-Bound on Cutie Marks. It is on June 22nd, 2012, 8:27 p.m. I made a call to Izzy, and I'm like, hey, there's like this pony shit, and like I feel like it's gonna really be a motivating factor in my life. Like it's just really beautiful. I've like watched a couple of episodes now, and Izzy is the greatest person in the world because like whereas most people might side-eye you and be like, oh, this is sarcastic or this is ironic, it's like Izzy like listened to me and said like, yeah, fuck yeah, let's do this. Like I believe you, I believe you. And
like the starting point.
That was the trajectory of my life chosen right at that point. And so I then, in the weeks that followed, I was like, holy shit, I wonder if people are making like EDM music about My Little Pony. That'd be crazy. I remember looking on My Little Remix forums, and like the two big things were hearing This Day Aria, the normal one, the normal version of the song, and then hearing Archie's remix of Love Is in Bloom. And like that was like, I heard that, was like, they're making shit this fucking good in the show, and they're making shit this good in this community. I have to get myself in there.
Right.
And the major shit I did was like, I downloaded Balloon Party, the original com, and I like studied that whole thing. Like, what are people doing here? And like, I learned so much from just that, and like combining the new EDM influences I had got into earlier in the year, and like this like Silver and I working on music together already. It's like, why don't we just fucking make some pony music?
Oh my god.
And we were making pony tracks for like half a year, but didn't release any of them. I still have everything we made
just for fun.
Yeah, like just like testing out every sort of idea, and like we made a few records, made a few EPs. They never got released. But the one that stuck was No Matter What, that I released in 2012. I finished that with Izzy a month before we released it. I don't remember what the hesitation was for, but like, because I'm the type of person that once I do something, I'm just like, all right, put it out right now. So I'm not sure why we waited like a month to put it out, but we did. The original title is also called Cider Season, and what's crazy is I still have the original GarageBand project for it.
Oh my god.
Because I was making, I forgot to mention that too. I still made GarageBand my main DAW up until 2014.
What?
Anything before Fall to the Clouds was made in GarageBand. So
what did you switch to after that?
I switched to Ableton.
Ableton.
And I was reluctant at first because I was super like, I wanted to do things in hard mode and be like super proud of it. Like, I made like the greatest album of all time in GarageBand, and like, yeah. And then it was a really silly, like, I don't know, it was a really silly ego thing that I had. I grew out of that, and I got Ableton, and like I attribute learning a lot more about music by switching to Ableton, because it just has everything you really need.
Yeah, so far everyone has
mainly for
small
things.
Yeah. Was it intimidating to like start learning it?
What's funny is I feel like it was, but I can't like recall the emotion of going through it. I don't really remember how elegant my switch was. I don't recall it being that difficult.
Right.
But I probably attribute that to the fact that like GarageBand and Ableton work in similar linear fashions, whereas if I tried to switch to FL Studio, which is a lot less linear, I feel like it would have been much harder.
Right.
And all love to FL Studio as well, but like Ableton just worked a lot better for my mind.
Yeah, totally fair. What was the like first thing you guys made that like caught a surprising amount of traction?
It's hard. I mean, I would say "Fall to the Clouds" naturally, and that one I just did by myself. And this is when Silver started getting more busy. I was doing more records by myself.
Oh, right.
But before "Fall to the Clouds," I had some like success with like my Vinylicious remix I did for Scratton's track, "Back to Love" in 2013, which was a GarageBand one as well.
Ooh.
But really things picked up with "Fall to the Clouds," like, which is the funniest thing is because that is the first thing I made in Ableton. Like the moment I switched to Ableton, I got like my first like what I would call like hit thing.
Right.
And for years onward, I was the "Fall to the Clouds" person, which was like whatever.
Did your like whole OC, like your main one, like exist back then, or?
So, but you ask these questions should be like super easy to answer, but there's like so much like there's so much lore with every one of these questions.
Right. That's fine.
My original OC was actually Canny.
Oh, really?
Yes, and I might be able to send that at some point later, so you have like the photo for
like
it.
the drawing.
Like, actually, it was Pony Creator too. It's the greatest thing ever. I was making music for like a year, and I didn't have an OC because I just kinned Final Scratch instead.
Right.
And then that's when I learned about Scrat, and I was like, oh, they kind of have like the DJ Pwn 3 swag already. So I gotta like figure this shit out. So my original OC was Canny, and if you look at Canny's colors, it's actually an inversion of Final Scratch because I wanted to be Final Scratch, but I couldn't be Final Scratch. And so that's why blue and white, it's a blue coat, white mane instead of white mane, blue coat.
Oh my god.
Wait, sorry. Brain. It's the inverse of vinyl.
Yeah. It's like a kin soda almost, you could say.
Yeah, and the original name for it was Vi Scratch or Ultraviolet.
Oh my god.
And I abandoned that OC very quickly and didn't think about it for almost 10 years. No, was it 10 years? Yeah, basically 10. I didn't think about it for like 10 more years. And then I made the stupid ass like gray OC thing. Like it kind of went from different colors to different colors, and it used to be violet, but then it ended up like the design we settled on was like just fucking gray, like just gray and black OC, like bottom of the barrel colors.
Yeah.
No offense to gray black
No,
OCs, by the way, but for me, if my name's gonna be fucking Violet, what are we doing here? It's like gray.
Background pony core.
Yeah, I mean, and again, no hate. I love all OCs. But for me, I don't know. I just didn't care for a while. I was because like I kinned ponies more than I cared about my OC.
Right.
So I kind of had my OC, but it didn't like really matter very much.
You didn't use it very much or something.
Yeah, I don't think my OC really became any sort of relevance until like 2016 when I started doing the Super Pony World record. And then that's like not even my OC anymore. They've become kind of a different OC. That one's Vylet Feather Dance.
Right.
My OC is Vylet Lulamoon.
Like did you start out with like what's the term? Like more like music about existing things in the show and stuff?
Yeah. I was mainly focusing on the canon stuff, and
right.
Then, in the background, so Izzy and I started conceptualizing this thing called Starship Ponyville in 2012 when we first started doing pony records. And we were developing that in the background while I was doing like a lot of canon pony music. And I was very content doing that for a while. And then we started to get the ball rolling on stuff like the stories we were writing, and our first attempts were very like bad. And some people don't even realize that they're part of the lore because they're just that irrelevant sounding. So like most people who, when they hear Starship Ponyville, they think, oh, Mystic Acoustics, Homeward, et cetera, like fairy tales. But like technically, my first album that I released, Winter's End, like the really shitty one, was technically supposed to be related, but just we did not focus very hard on the story. Same thing with Horse Friends, which came out in 2014. Also was supposed to be part of that lore, but like it didn't really seem like it. So we were just not great at doing our writing yet. So we were testing the story idea out while doing like mainly show focused music.
Right.
And Super Pony World in 2016 was like the first time we were like, this is where it starts for real this time.
Did you stick to like one story for like or like a group of characters for like a really long time initially?
Yeah, originally the storyline was pretty focused like on just originally their main character of Starship Ponyville was supposed to be Twilight, which is like very far gone an idea now because the main character, we don't really know who the main character is at this point because it's sort of just like which section of the story you're paying attention to. But we really started to shake things up with Super Pony World when we made Feather Dance like the main character for that part of the story, and then Saturn as the main character for like the mainline Starship Ponyville stuff, and then that became very standard until really it was when I did Fish Whisperer that I started to be like adding lots of different characters and story ideas, and I feel like that's Fish Whisperer is when I came into myself as like a writer in terms of like these stories and stuff.
Right, really make it your own thing, as so to say.
Yeah, and with lots of variants.
Is it like because now it's like pretty OC focused overall, right? Or
yeah, very much so. I mean, like it depends on what I say is basically all of G4 canon except for EQG.
Oh, right.
And except for the last problem, you basically consider all of that canon for the lore. So it still borrows from that universe, but it has very much transcended into being like just a strange AU. Basically, it's the most glorified fanfic of all time.
What made you want to like focus more on the OCs than the like canon cast?
A few things, but one of the major limitations was people wouldn't like pay attention to my work if it was super OC focused for a while. So I kind of was working a lot with like canon story stuff and characters because that was what people wanted the most. And there was a point where I was like, I don't feel like compromising what I want to do for what everyone else wants to see and hear. And so I started to do more of that original stuff, and it wasn't super like intensely received at first, but after Cutie Marks, basically the stuff that I do that's the most popular is pretty much exclusively OC stuff now.
Yeah.
I think what's surprising is let me fact check myself really quickly, but I think after Fish Whisperer, the focus pretty much removes canon characters from the focal point of the stories, and these albums have been very well received. Like among them, Carousel and Monarch of Monsters are like some of my most like streamed and purchased records that I've done, and that's just OCs.
Yeah, hell yeah. Did you notice that the like people that consume it are also like, you know, more people outside of the whole like pony bubble?
Yeah, and my goal has always, like, my goal from the very start has always been to bridge the gap between what people consider like fan art and non-fan art, because in my opinion there isn't really a distinction. I think fan art is really just if a company's IP isn't involved, because nothing is inherently like original.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, when you draw a person, you didn't invent the biology of a person. When you draw a landscape, I mean, tell me which mountains have you invented?
It's all fan art of life.
In my opinion, everything is fan art.
Yeah.
And what people colloquially describe as fan art is just if a company is involved. And I have very little sympathy towards like companies. So it's like but my goal has been to sort of bridge this gap. And I love to go back and forth between shit. And what I mean by that is taking the pony audience and introducing them to non-pony stuff. Taking the non-pony audience and introducing them to pony stuff. And with this latest shit, Monarch is like introducing a lot of my audience base to more experimental, noisy, like I don't want to say prolific, but I want to say like very like considered and poetic music.
Yeah.
And then the audience that I've garnered from that, now I want to take them, the people who know this kind of music already, and I want to introduce them to fucking dance trash pop music with like the coolest sounds you've ever heard. Like we take the prog rockers and we introduce them to like top 40 pop music, and we take the top 40 pop music listeners and introduce them to prog rock. That's my whole thesis as this artist.
Go after all the people that will comment stuff like, I'm not a insert fandom here, but this rules.
Yes. And then I want them to like understand that this is like, this format is no different from anything else. Like everything can be important art no matter where it's coming from.
Yeah, exactly. Is it like harder to write like OC stuff compared to canon stuff, or
that was a good question that I don't quite know the answer to, because with OCs, I'm just daydreaming constantly, day in, day out. I'm just like, what if my character did this? What if my character went to this place? What if my character had this like thing? It's like, that's like always happening as a background calculation in my mind. Every time I talk to like my friends or like go somewhere and do something with my life experiences, I'm like, this reminds me of like how this character would react to this situation. It's always like this shit back and
no
forth.
boundaries, essentially.
But that does take a lot of like calculation.
Yeah.
And with canon characters, there's two things you can do. One, you can write within the limitation of what already exists. Or two, you could be completely contrarian and like transform them.
Yeah.
And Cutie Marks, that was the thesis for that, is like take these characters that people already know and be like, how do I like flip them to be the same character, but like in a new perspective?
Right. Like it was oddly believable, but still very your own like interpretation in that way.
Yeah. It's just like the character themselves are a basis for whatever you do, whether it's following that character to the truest extent or using that basis to completely contrast what they could be.
Right. Do you because a lot of your stuff is obviously quite distinct from each other. Like it's not you don't stick to like one genre or whatever. Is that like more difficult for you, or is that like just fueled by your enthusiasm?
It is totally fueled by enthusiasm, and I think genuinely I would like be very uninterested in making music if I had to be a genre artist. It feels so much easier to just be like, oh, I've been like listening to a lot of like hip hop. I'm gonna do a hip hop record. Oh, I've been listening to a lot of noise rock. I'm gonna do a noise rock record. It's like I feel really lucky to have established very early on that I'm gonna do whatever the fuck I feel like music wise, and people will just, instead of coming to me for a style or a genre that's like very particularly defined, it's basically just like, the Vylet Pony project will assure you that you'll at least hear something interesting.
Hell yeah.
Whether you like it or not, you can't deny that it's interesting.
Yeah, no, you're right. Is it like is it scary in a way to, if you have like established followers, listeners, whatever, to like introduce them to like a completely different thing than what they got attached to? Or
I think if you were to ask this question like 2018, maybe. Nowadays, really not at all. I like challenging my listener base. The only moment of like doubt I've had for myself is basically with Monarch, because it really is an extreme divergence from what everyone's like knowing me for, but it won over just fine. Really.
Right. Yeah, it seems very, very positive from what I saw. I see a lot of people, obviously, like they'll call it when they see it for the first time or something, right? They'll say stuff like brony music or whatever. How do you feel about that nowadays?
Like that initial reaction or the title?
Yeah, the people that just like categorize it like that.
So there's two sides of it. I think I'm a very sensitive person, and I tend to take things like very, what's the word, personally. which can be a weakness, but also I'm happy to like be in touch with my own empathy and like kind of understand what needs are emotionally. So I think the main thing is I need to always be moderating myself, make sure I don't just like start like screaming at people, because it's not productive.
Yeah.
But it's hard too, because I get very defensive with like myself. But the other side of that coin is I take a sort of like extreme like sadistic pleasure in like pissing people off like that. Like basically, if someone's out here like, oh, brony music this, brony music that, I'm like, yes, give me more of your time, release more of your energy, and be challenged as a person.
Yeah, exactly.
I love that. Like, if I'm pissing people off, it's probably because they need to be pissed off.
Yeah.
To learn a lesson of some kind.
If they take the time to like respond to stuff, that says a lot, I always feel like.
Yeah, I take extreme pride in that.
Right, because you don't really identify with the like term yourself, right? Or
no, I don't identify with the brony term myself, but I am like selectively contrarian, as I think I've talked about a few times in other places, where it's like, as a bass player, I don't really accept the label for myself, and it's really a game of semantics, but there is like a connotation to the word brony, and there is like, you know, a history that I don't want to like associate with. However, if it pisses someone off to hear that a brony music album is top of the charts on Rate Your Music, I'm like, fuck yeah, it's brony music. I hope it pisses you off. And it's like, I don't ever want to also like turn like my face to like the community and like necessarily like alienate people who associate with the label either. It's just like that particular identity is not for me. I feel less attached to it, and like part of it is a selfish thing, because like I care a lot about how I'm perceived, but the other thing is like, I don't think it's fair for me to even associate with the label when I'm so disconnected to the fandom anyways. I feel like it would be sort of insulting to people who are really deep into the community for someone like me who is like very loosely involved to be like, oh yeah, I'm like blah blah blah, the brony whatever. Like that would be really insulting, especially when there's such like a rich community of artists and like people who super identify with the label, who are out there really being bronies and
like really staying up to date with all the media and shit.
Yeah, I don't want to stomp all over that shit. But that's what I feel like I would be doing if I super owned the label.
Yeah. Do you at least use like other like fandom terms for yourself, or not so much?
Not really. Not for any of the like media I'm a super big fan of. Like, a lot of the stuff I do is like furry adjacent. I would never call myself a furry. Yeah. Genuinely. Unless it pisses someone off on purpose. I would never call myself like, I don't even do like Undertale people have like a Deltaruners. No, I don't know. Like if there is a term, because Undertale Deltarune is like one of the most important pieces of media in my life. Right. And I'm involved with it constantly, day in, day out. And I would still never associate with like if there were a label for it, because it's like, I mainly want to kind of define the shit for myself, which is kind of a newer development in the last few years.
It's like your experience, not like a fandom's experience that you want to focus on, I guess. In a way.
Yeah, totally. And like, I don't, full power to everyone who like adopts these labels for themselves. Like that's their prerogative, and like that can be a really important thing for whoever does that. For me, I like kind of, I know what my path is right now.
Right. When you started out with like this is like, you know, like the more fandom based like music and stuff, and like slowly but surely I feel like you focused more on more personal stuff. Was that like a difficult switch to make, or
fascinatingly no, and I think that was paired with just like not caring anymore. And just sort of like the way I feel is like, if someone's gonna feel weird about that stuff, or someone's going to be upset about that stuff, or like, or want to judge me for the shit I go through, the shit I talk about, like I'm just like fine with it, because it's like, okay, go. I don't need you here, because it's like I'm such a big fan of filtering the audience. Like, I only really want people around here who are going to care about me and my art for what it is. And if someone just like fucks off because of something I write, is like, all right, that's chill. Like, now my audience is a little bit cleaner.
Yeah, right? Exactly. Yeah, I get that.
So it's sort of just I don't know. I think once you get older, a lot of different aspects of like, I don't know, shame and self-consciousness sort of just like shed away as you like, see the world for what it is.
Right. It's just, it becomes easier to dismiss like hateful. I don't know. It's like, I mean, for me personally, it's like over time, I just kind of start realizing that people that are that angry, there's like a weird sense of pity. I don't know. It's like,
No, totally, because you know that you have to be compensating a lot in order to like, interact with stuff that way.
Mm-hmm.
And so my thought is usually after I've felt hurt about it, because I will still feel hurt and
of course.
But once that feeling is over, my feeling is like, I hope that they find what they're looking for.
Yeah, exactly. It's also just, some people will say like what is it? Like where it's like, oh, ignore the haters or whatever, but it's also, it's not genuine either to pretend that it doesn't do something, right? To like,
I mean, I've one of the major things is because I'm on break right now from it, but I've been in therapy.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the major things was just like talking about just the way, quote unquote, hater is a silly word, because like a lot of times these people's like disinterest or anger is like validated, just their interfacing with it is not okay. But just going over that stuff, and like I think everyone who works in doing art should have a therapist for shit like that, because it's like it helps a lot just to like talk that shit and then be validated and move on, so you don't like externalize it to other people.
Yeah, get some perspective and don't like channel it. Yeah, it's like it's a circle in that sense. I always felt like.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like, because like your most recent like album, right? Like Monarch of Monsters is obviously like very personal, sensitive type content or whatever. I can imagine maybe some people who want to make stuff still feel like a very strong maybe boundary between themselves and their art or whatever. Is there like an advice you would give to people that are like terrified to put themselves out there that way?
Well, one, okay, it would make sense to be terrified of putting yourself out there, because people it's easiest for non-artists to rip art apart because they're not doing anything.
Right.
They haven't been there. I feel like that should be the number one reason you go and do it, is because like you have the option to be an artist or not be an artist, and the barrier of entry is quite low. All you have to do is make art.
Right.
And to make really personal art, for me, it's out of necessity. If I don't do this, I'm missing out on processing this in a healthier way, and I'm missing out on the opportunity to share that story and like maybe see if anyone else like resonates with it, and then like it helps them in some way.
Right.
For me, it's necessity, and a lot of times that overcomes my sense of like hesitation for doing something. But it makes sense to be reserved, because again, like people are cruel. So I think you have to find a way to be in a safe space for yourself, to take care of yourself, so that you would be able to process the kind of stuff people say in response to it.
Yeah.
And that the important thing to remember is that when people say the shit that they're gonna say, is that it doesn't really like have a judgment call on the kind of person you are, or like a judgment call on like who you are as a person, because it can be very tempting to be like, oh, someone said this negative thing about my art, which in turn means something about me, like something that devalues me as a person, which it doesn't.
Yeah.
And that's the important thing to remember, is that like at the end of the day, it's people who don't really take the consideration necessary to understand the stuff that artists do. And it's super easy for them to do it. And you just have to learn to create a safe space for yourself first, and then follow that necessity down, because that need can be very deep rooted.
Right. How do you go about like making like a song with like such a story type like core? Like where do you even start?
That is a very nebulous question, because I sort of don't think about it very consciously very much. It's sort of just like, I like to call a lot of what I do just the daydream method, of where I just daydream about shit, and it doesn't matter how difficult it will be to execute. I just let it coagulate into like some sort of thing that I can work with. It doesn't have to be the final product. It just has to be a ball I can hold and observe and like, chisel out the
make it
proper
exist
stuff.
first before anything else.
Yeah, like the record I'm doing right now is called Love and Pony Step, and I knew the basic premise of it was going to be exploring my character top 5 videos vid in a more, I guess, consequential light, and I wanted to facilitate that through like a semi-breakup story.
Right.
And I knew that premise from the very start, and it's sort of just been filling in the blanks of just like, how do we get from point A to point B? Oh, it would make sense for this to happen because of this thing that happened earlier, or like, oh, I know how she behaves around this kind of stimuli, so I feel like she would feel this way about this thing. And just sort of like, I have these characters developed and I just drop them into my daydream brain and let them run around and they kind of figure out the story. There's usually a couple of like elements that help me figure out what the overall pacing and linearity of things will be. In terms of Monarch, what I did in that case was I really wrote out an outline of the story and I developed the story sort of first before working on the music stuff. And then with the basic outline to inform the music, as I worked on the music, that informed more events in the actual story itself. It's a kind of a back and forth thing.
Right.
In Love and Pony Step, the one I'm working on right now, a missing link for me that helped me fill out some details is I finished playing the game Disco Elysium very recently. Love the game very much. And I started like narrating part of Love and Pony Step from the perspective of the narrator in Disco Elysium. It's all about talking, all about dialogue. And then the narrator, Lenval Brown, does an incredible job like going from point A to point B and like describing situations and stuff. And so I started daydreaming, oh, it'd be cool if like the story was like facilitated by this, and it gave me some ideas for like how Vin would be processing her internal emotions and like processing the stimuli around her in the context of like that setting, like Disco Elysium. And halfway through this project, I was like, what if I like got in touch with him, like the narrator? So I did. And as far as I can tell, we are going to be doing like a format where he narrates part of the album and skip parts. So that's something I'm very excited about.
That's super
But
exciting.
that filled out a lot of the story space by just daydreaming, oh, what if this happened?
Yeah. Do you like take notes or something if something comes to mind, or?
Yes, I have a few like random, it's not super organized, but it is massive. I have, since I think Girls Who Are Wizards, I've been keeping like a master document for projects, but then I also have like other notes lying around and stuff. And I know how to get to them. It's just very unintuitive for anyone else to try and find them. Mainly because that's just, I do whatever is like going to be the most efficient and communicative in the moment.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But I do take lots of notes, and most of it is like, I'll think about, I have like a section for each song. I tend to write out track lists first also. Before I do anything, just like I basically daydream what would be the track list for this imaginary album in my head, and then I slowly start to think of, oh, what would this song sound like? What would this song sound like? What would this song sound like? And then slowly I'll be like, oh, this doesn't work in this location. I'm gonna move that down here. Oh, this one could be done with a better title, and like the song ideas change around that and stuff, and that's through the documentation I do.
Smart. So the titles exist before the actual piece, essentially.
Usually,
like
yes. And usually it's never going to be the same.
Yeah.
It's just a framework to start with.
Oh, that makes sense. Has there been any like downside with because like I'm not personally, like I'm not a music world genius, so I don't really know how people track how well music does, but I did see something about how like the Monarch album was on, what was it, like some sort of album of the year website, and it was like
album
number
of the year.
4.
I don't remember the order of it, but it was a very profound score apparently.
Yeah.
The website I tend to use more, and this is to my detriment because this website kind of sucks, but I use Rate Your Music quite a bit. But both websites, Rate Your Music and Album of the Year, have like their own set of biases, and like it's not a great way of understanding like the general perspective of like an album's reception or whatever. But it is a place to, I guess, study
Yeah.
But album of the year, I didn't really pay much attention to until Monarch because I think it was like in the top few thousand albums on the website now.
Yeah.
And it got what's like called a must-hear marker, which is like designated by the website staff and stuff. And it has to meet, I think, a score of 80 or more with 200 plus ratings total. Something like that. And then on Rate Your Music, Monarch received a what's called being this is such like nerd shit, not just to like the average person, but to like anyone who knows about music. Like, this is still nerd shit. Like, it's like the stuff really doesn't matter, but I'm saying it anyway. That Monarch of Monsters was what's called bolded on Rate Your Music, which means that it is noted within the top 10,000 listed albums on the website with a reputable amount of ratings to back it up. So it's not like 5 out of 5 album with 4 people who rated it. So it's not like that. And what it does is when you look at someone's album list, their page, a bolded album will appear in bold letters instead of like normal letters and stuff. It is still very arbitrary. Like, really, the stuff doesn't matter in real life, but like it is a thing to consider.
I imagine it introduced like new people to a few new people to the album at least. Like, would you say there's like a downside to people coming in from like way outside?
There can be, and the thing with Monarch specifically is this is the kind of album that like music snobs really like.
Right.
And it's not an audience I'm very thrilled to placate to. And that's partially why I'm doing Love and Pony stuff next.
Right.
Monarch of Monsters is like big epic odyssey of like real instruments and like blah blah, like there's like really poetic and like et cetera, which is like stuff that I value a lot. But I listen to everything and I make everything. So my idea was, what if we took the audience that just came in from there and I introduced them to like the most digital bullshit top 40 trash pop bro step album imaginable. And not only is it like that, but it's like fucking breakup nostalgia album. It's like full of cheese, it's full of corn. And I'm really excited to like troll the newcomers with it.
Yeah, that like the
people
filter
who
thing.
really know me are gonna get it. People who really know me are gonna like this album, I think. And the people who just came in, we're going to be doing them a big fucking challenge.
Yeah, exactly. Is it like hard to mix the like the stuff that you really want to make, and then, you know, because I imagine this is like your full-time thing essentially, right? Like, you make music, so it's like, because I can imagine that there might be some pressure of like, oh shit, what if it like flops so hard that I get in trouble or something? Like, is it a tough balance between I want to make this that I really want to make and I don't want to disappoint my fan base, or do you not really care?
For me, I am able to make things work for the most part, so that's not really something I have to worry about very much. There isn't a label, which means no one's collecting money from me. Everything's like completely independent. And I've made like, I don't know how many albums I've made, like over 20. Whew. And so that is a very reasonable amount of like, I guess, compensation to deal with. And so it gives me a lot of freedom to just do whatever I want. And I am not trying to maximize like profit or income or like success at all. If I know how to do it too, because I've done it in the past when I was much younger. I knew how to capitalize on trends. I knew how to capitalize on like, you know, what was going to be the most well received, and it would work about much of the time. And I don't like doing that because it's like soul crushing and annoying.
Yeah, it's like fan art for illustration, I feel like.
Yeah, it's more like fan art for something you don't really care about very much.
Yeah.
is the better like comparison. So that is to say, with Monarch, I was making that album with the full intention of it flopping. And I was happy with that, because it was like, I felt like it was going to alienate my audience. It was going to be really disruptive to like a lot of people would maybe be too intense for some people. It was going to be like received negatively from outside my community, from people who are just like, what the fuck is this shit, and blah 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 blah. And like, I was fine with that. I was like, this thing needs to exist, and it has to be done the way that I'm wanting to do it. I don't really fucking care what happens after that. It just needs to exist.
Right. It's based.
And yeah, I was expecting it to flop. I was fully content with that, and then it did the opposite of that. People can
a lot of soul and
feel passion, like through your art. People can tell when you've done something passionately, and they connect with that a lot, even if it's like something they don't think that they'll enjoy the first time.
I feel especially in the like corporate world now that we're in, people crave very, heartfelt and genuine passion projects above all else.
Yeah, because the corporate world is encroaching on everything, like especially with tech bros pushing their AI agenda bullshit on everything. And it's like, I think what's becoming more important is to do stuff that's experimental, and to do stuff that's like challenging, and to do stuff that could either be like super flawed or otherwise off the beaten path from what people expect. And I am an adopter of the idea that almost nothing an individual can do as an artist is genuinely pretentious.
Yeah.
I think people like to throw that word around a lot, especially with art that challenges them. I really think the only kind of art that could be pretentious, more likely than not, is if it's like corporate, made by run by a CEO to do this like Netflix show.
Exactly.
Like that's what I feel like. The term pretentious can work, but like when it's an individual, making something, and coming from any sort of perspective, it's going to be informed by something, whether it's what they want to produce or not. I feel like it's very difficult to really truly prove something being pretentious. And there's like, I've sort of adopted this idea that I'm very prideful if people call my work that, because I know that it's getting under their skin a little bit, and I appreciate that.
If art doesn't make you feel things, then it's not art.
Exactly. If something pisses you off a lot, doesn't that constitute it as some sort of like profound art? Because
exactly.
If it wasn't, then you just like move on immediately.
If there's like someone, like, let's say someone's listening now and they're like demotivated by, the whole AI hype that's happening right now, because like it's kind of everywhere you look, right? Is there something you would say to them in particular?
I think AI is going to get perfect. Unfortunately,
right.
That is, I disagree strongly with the notion of people who have said, oh, well, always looks shit like this. Always, it's going to get better and it's going to get perfect. And to me, there isn't any shame in seeing something and liking it, and then the moment someone tells you it's AI, you're like, oh shit, I don't like it anymore. Because I feel like tech bros are going to be like, but I gotcha, didn't I? It's like, that's not how like life works. Like the moment you have more added context for something, you change your mind. Like it affects your processing of it. Like it's a completely valid thing to have. And I think the majority mindset is people are going to value the non-AI art. I think that's just natural. It's going to get better. It's going to run shit into the ground quite a bit, but the staying power of the sapient spirit of living things on this planet is to appreciate the organic and the real.
The translation of the human experience or whatever.
Yeah. I don't think that's going away, and I think people will be vigilant in like considering how this works into their own life.
Right.
I feel worried because I know it's going to overtake shit, but at the same time, I'm also just like, we've persisted through a lot of bullshit. People persisted through a lot of bullshit, and we'll figure some shit out. And like, people are always going to want to make art, and people are always going to want to like consume art by like people who made art.
Right.
That's not going to change. So I feel very relieved at that notion, I think.
Is there something that you see like a music version of the little how to draw an owl image that you see people share online that you think is just not true to newbies?
Like, can you rephrase the question? I'm not quite sure what you're asking.
No, it's like tutorials or like beginner advice that people give that you wouldn't agree with. Is there anything that comes to mind?
In terms of music?
Yeah.
That is a good question because there's a lot of bad advice, but I can't like call any to mind right now. I've talked about this quite a bit in the past like 2 years or so because it's something I've been sort of growing out of a lot, but I don't think this is a prevailing opinion anymore. Like I think this is kind of a dead opinion in the ground, but when I was growing up making music, I was around a lot of people who would dissuade you from like using like presets. And for if that's ambiguous, what a preset is it's just like if you have a synthesizer or if you have a music software and it has sounds that you can just play, then there's a type of person who would get really angry at you for using them because they believe that you need to create every single thing from scratch.
Right.
Which, especially if you're just a solo artist, is just like, that's a lot of things to do for what essentially isn't going to add up to any big difference. I think it's important to study specifically in my realm of music. If you're like a folk artist, for example, I think this matters a lot less, but specifically if you're working in like digital audio workstations and like creating music digitally and using synthesizers and using like non-traditional sounds like beyond guitars and stuff, it's important to study sound design because if you want to make something that doesn't exist, which you're going to want to probably, you have to know how to get from point A to point B. And you don't want to always use the same shit everyone else is using as well because you want to make sure that there is stuff about your work that is able to be identifiably you. That said, this is perfectly accomplished through the use of presets if you just know how to like use them and not overuse them to the point where you're relying so much on like someone else to do the sound design for you.
Right.
And for the longest time that fucked me up because I would either try really hard to like spend like 90% of my writing sessions just making sounds instead of making music. And the other 10% of the time I would be hiding the presets that I was using. I would rename them to something else and like be like, oh, no one can know about this.
Is it the same with autotune or?
Autotune, well, that's a complicated thing, but it's like autotune does not make you a better singer. Like you can tell when someone doesn't really know what they're doing.
Yeah.
And like I feel two ways about it. One, if someone doesn't know what they're doing but they're using autotune, fire. Awesome. That's awesome. Because you know what that is? It's removing the barrier to create something. That's actually fucking awesome.
Yeah.
And if someone does know what they're doing and they're using autotune, well, then it's probably going to be used for like contextual purposes and creative effects and stuff. On Monarch, I barely used any autotune whatsoever. There is a little bit on like Vitality Glitch, I think, and Huntress. But other than that, there isn't really a lot of autotune on Monarch. With Love and Pony Step, however, that shit is cranked. And it's not because I feel self-conscious as a singer. I don't want to like assume my skill level, but I don't think I'm a bad singer. That said, autotune is fucking fun.
Yeah.
And like belting out shit that you probably can't sing normally and letting the autotune just fix those little things and like it sounds super crazy. And you can like move your voice around everywhere and the autotune will just like put in some work to make you sound interesting.
Hell yeah.
I'm a huge supporter of just like, you know, if it's you doing it, then do it.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. Well, last but not least, is there anything, anyone, or something you did or someone else did that you would like to shout out?
Oh my god, there's like that's a loaded question because that's where there's so many options that my brain is just like,
you pull out a list.
I could pull out a list. Good lord. Wow, yeah, that's a hard question. Because if I'm faced with ample choice, I like freeze up
Oh, that's
at
fair.
the choice part. I mean, I'm very, very, very like proud of Tracy Breaks and what she's been doing as an artist. And she recently put out her debut record last year. It's called My Twee Monsters. And amazing, amazing album. And she fully understands like everything that she does in a way that I could only say is like a profound wisdom that she'll never admit to it being a profound wisdom. And she has inspiration from the MLP fandom. Some of the first conversations we had together in 2023 was like talking about My Little Pony, and like she was sort of starting to reclaim that for herself. And like, even though My Twee Monsters doesn't necessarily reference My Little Pony entirely, it is a product of, I think, that sort of reclamation of self and identity, and like a lot of that has made its way into the album. It's a really, 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 really good album. So shout out Tracy Breaks Forever, and also another peer of mine who I've known since earlier fandom days, like Sizzy. She also put out I think it's her debut record as well, Weight of the World, which is going to be, I think, remembered as absolutely game-changing when it comes to the electronic music scene, because it is so fresh and so new, and she has worked like day in, day out to be the artist that she is, and is a crazy inspiration to me.
Awesome.
So, and last but not least, I would like to shout out Pilfcord, which is like the server space that I share with a bunch of my friends now, and like we met because they were wanting to make like a Vylet wiki, but they weren't like showing me; they were just like doing it for fun. And then like I came in, I was like, "Hey, I could like help with this shit," and then we all became like friends and stuff.
Aww.
And like, I've been like a social hermit for like the past 4 years, and this is like the first time since maybe like 2019 that I've like actually like had like a properly like a friend group that I interact with regularly.
Yeah.
Like, these are really, really crazy people. I can't name them all. There's a lot of them, but
fair.
So shout out Tracy Breaks, shout out Sizzy, and shout out Pilfcord, Pilf Squad, everyone.
Yo, awesome. Well, listener, if you want to check out Violet's stuff, there will be some links under the YouTube video down below. Thank you so much again for being on the episode.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. Dear listener, stay awesome, stay creative, and we'll see you next time.
And the Huntress watches a bit.